Everybody, I'm Jason Klum, host of the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes. You can see us at comedyonvinyl.com. All of 2017, I'm listening to a comedy album a day. I am several days, weeks behind, but I am playing catch-up, which is why I'm covering 11 albums in this edition. There's going to be a day, I swear, when I'm back to one a day. But finally, we're getting this close. I'm about to stop recording Comedy on Vinyl for quite a while. We're going to take a little bit of a break. I've got months of episodes banked. Apologies to those who have been in those episodes, but for the most part, people know this. But that's a little behind-the-scenes peek that you didn't need or care about, want, deserve. You don't deserve it. Why would you deserve it? You don't want it. Anyway, so we're going to start with Belle Barth. My next story is a little risque. I don't really know how to say that this stood out from the other Belle Barth albums. A lot of these comics of a certain era, of a certain type, I say type just like, she's a blue comic, whatever. A lot of the albums kind of run together. There's nothing that really stood out to me, but I do, I think I mentioned previously that I like her use of, her heavy use of Yiddish. And I would say unapologetic, as though she needs to apologize. But it's just like, just excessive use of Yiddish, and then excessive... That sounds like a judgment. That's not what I mean. More than I'm used to. So she uses Yiddish a lot, and then will explain it to you sometimes, and then sometimes doesn't. Because you don't necessarily need to know it to get the joke, but if you do, it's going to land. But, she's dirty, she's silly, nothing stood out about this. Again, I talk about all Rusty's albums. Even some of hers blur together a little bit for me. But her stuff is, I think, a little easier to hear in evolution because of when she started, I think. This is, Belle Barth had her thing. Her thing made her famous. She kept doing the same thing. She was a Catskills comic. That's the kind of thing that you do. And that's fine. The cover's great. It's very, very gritty. I don't know. It's a lot of fun. I bet she would have been a ton of fun to watch. You can tell by her attitude. Her voice is a delight, by the way. Like, I wish I could imitate it. I can't really do women's voices, but her voice is great. And censored, not for not for airplay, for adults only. Oh my. But again, it's one of those that sure, risque, but by today's standards, pretty tame. Now the next one, these are problematic. I have tons of these, and I had to pick one. Again, I'm still going through women comics. That's about to actually kind of sort of stop, because I did burn through so many of them for March, but I am still looking. They made so many of these in the 70s when people were rediscovering a love for the silent era, or that is to say the golden age, but also silent era stuff, which is why Marx Brothers had a resurgence, etc. So of course W.C. Fields and Mae West had a resurgence, but there are just so many albums that had these kind of covers or super generic covers. I kind of like this art. I like the W.C. Fields. I don't know that it flatters her. Not that it flatters him, but it's like they even look like they're different styles. Anyway, so I mostly paid attention to Mae West. I mean, the songs are funny, and I've always found her and her attitude funny. But, and I know she didn't say come up and see me sometime exactly. But that's kind of, that was her attitude. She was the sexy lady. All the guys wanted her. And that was the deal. And that was a joke. It's kind of one note. W.C. Fields, I think, was given an opportunity maybe to have a little bit more character than that. But if you listen to her, it's fun. She was fun to listen to. Not for her singing, but again for her attitude. That I think kind of informed a lot of femme fatales or comedy ladies in general. But I don't know. There's not a lot I can say. But I did listen. I listened to her stuff specifically because I wanted to, get more exposure to Mae West. I think you're better. The problem with the stuff from this era is you better just go watch the movies if you can. That said, home video is not really a thing yet when this came out. This is 1970. Blah blah blah. I don't have the year. My apologies. This is the problem with a lot of these. So it could be the 60s even. Okay, this next one is actually going to come up in a few weeks on the podcast. I discussed it with Jackie Cation, but I listened to it for this first a while ago. This is Betty Walker's Hello Seal, It's Me. Betty Walker, thanks to Cliff Nestroff for helping Jackie figure out this was 1969. When I looked on Discogs, I did not find the year. Perhaps there are multiple pages for her. Don't know. it's okay. It's fun. Her shtick is that, pardon me, she's a wife, always on the phone with her friend Seal, as you can see, complaining about the different things that are happening in her household. And that's it for 40 minutes. There's some fun bits about that she buys a horse secretly, like kind of sitcom stuff. It almost feels like this is like, hey, this would be good stuff for a sitcom, which, to be fair, it would. Most of the stories would actually work. And she's fun to listen to. She did a lot of panel stuff on game shows back in the day. Funny lady. And not a bad album at all. Not a bad album, but it's one of those things that maybe wouldn't sustain now in terms of... and we discuss all this on the podcast, so you'll see when Jackie Cation's next episode comes out in a few weeks. But yeah, this was fun to discuss and fun to listen to. Definitely fun to listen to. Didn't get bored. It's, nothing super spectacular, but there's definitely some great bits in it. I did enjoy listening to Betty Walker perform. Next, I am going to blame Jimmy Pardo for this. It's one of those things that you think you invented as a kid. If you're like somebody like me who just wanted to keep making stuff, you think you invented the whole... I swear I invented, putting my voice and intercutting James Kirk, Captain Kirk's voice in an interview. And then I feel like I did come up with this idea on my own, not knowing it existed. Not something to brag about. This is kind of parallel thinking. It doesn't really matter. But this is Dickie Goodman's Mr. Jaws. Mr. Jaws was a hit. Long story short, it's way more... Actually, honestly, if you listen to Jimmy Pardo describe it on his podcast, it's way funnier than I can ever do it justice. His description of it is. But Dickie Goodman had a hit with Mr. Jaws, which was a 45... of him doing an interview. Hello there, Mr. Jaws. You're here on the beach, and what are you going to say when you eat somebody? And then the answer from the shark is a clip from a song that sort of maybe works. If let's say yummy, 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 I got love in my tummy was one of the... It wasn't, but Mr. Jaws, what would you say? Yummy, 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 I got love in my tummy. Then an awkward cut. Really, Mr. Jaws? Are you sure? That barely sustains a single. It's an entire album, short, but an entire album of that type of thing. And it's just a novelty. It's fun to know how that this could be put on an album. It's interesting to listen to once. I got it for $2.99. I buy most of my albums for $1 just to discover, but I couldn't find Mr. Jaws anywhere else, so I spent the money on Mr. Jaws. This is one of those, pardon me, this is one of those that might go elsewhere. Don't know what to say. It's one note, absolutely one note. What is not one note is Frank Welker's Almost Sold Out. Frank Welker, if you don't know, is one of the greatest voice actors of all time. Also an accomplished stand-up, a very funny stand-up. So many people have described Frank Welker's act to me as him with a TV on stage and him kind of doing the sound effects and the voices, kind of dubbing them over, which is you just put on a different channel just to keep flipping. That doesn't work for this, so it's mostly him doing his impressions. Just the list of impressions is insane, and they're just so good, including Answering Machines of the Rich and Famous, which is all just joke after joke after joke after joke. But, I mean, he's got Bill Cosby, William F. Buckley, Edith and Archie, Gomer Pyle, David Letterman's teeth is one of the bits. More Gomer Pyle, W.C. Fields, Dan Rather, Andy Rooney. They're all great. Frank Welker's also been the voice of Freddy on Scooby-Doo since the beginning. He is a man who is sometimes sound effects. Like he's that good. One of the greatest voice actors of all time. This is a fun album to listen to. It's very 80s. There are a lot of guys and ladies out there who could make a whole shtick, a whole hour out of just doing impressions and doing, I think it might go a little something like this. He doesn't do it's not as shticky as that, and also his voices are really good, and they integrate well enough that it's a lot of fun to listen to. It's a quick listen. I don't know that it's necessarily a short album, but it's a quick listen because he's so damn talented. And I would actually recommend picking this one up and listening to it. You can't find it often, not necessarily easy to find, but it's a lot of fun. And Mr. Welker, if you're out there, and I know you are, you might not be watching or listening, but I know you're out there technically. I would love to have you on the show. That's just another invitation. This is, okay, you'll see in the background, this right here. This is I've Never Kissed an Ugly Woman, a Groucho Marx compilation, a bootleg from the American Cornyphone record label, a bootleg label. This is from another bootleg label, which I believe is called Happy Face Records. This is called Comedy's Greatest Hits. I got it because it was so awkward looking. I kind of assumed it would be a bootleg, but it also has more detail than bootlegs often had, because that is literally, there's just barely any information on that. This is just so, it's just so old-timey comedy music, including Two Black Crows, parts 1 and 2, a Rudy Valley song, Hooray, Hooray, I'm Going Away. Sweet Georgia Brown passes for a comedy song on here. Maybe it is, maybe the lyrics are, but I don't know. I saw cigarettes instead of ligarettes almost. There's a Jim Backus track on here. It's just goofy. Old songs. Not to dismiss that stuff, but I don't have a whole lot of, I don't even have a lot of nostalgia for it. I have nostalgia for the good old stuff. This stuff is just, I don't know what was happening here. I get Groucho Marx. I get that even for some of the bad tracks that are on there. This, it's so old-timey and just to the point that I couldn't sit through it. Next one, I cannot wait to do this, especially, I can't say the guest yet, but this is the Robin Hood, story as told by Roger Miller. Roger Miller, of course, was the voice of Alan Adale in this, in the movie, and this is some of my favorite songs in all of Disney. I had this is a real scratched up copy. The Disney ones are sometimes harder to find. I got this for a reasonable price up in Berkeley, and it's got the full color little book with it, which I haven't read through, but it's just so much fun. I love Robin Hood. I love the music, and Roger Miller is great to listen to. And I anytime you get to listen to anything involving Pat Buttram, I'm excited. Cry my Netley trigger, put that pea shooter down. That was not my best. I could do it better. I'm sleepy. Whatever. Robin Hood, great. I mean, obviously, I love it. It's fantastic. Here's a weird one. They're all weird. This is the many voices of Peter Ustinov in after-supper conversation with Cliff Micklemore, Kenneth Alsop, and Derek Hart. It's a BBC thing. I legitimately assume this was a planned, written, or heavily improvised sketch album, somewhat in the style of the Grand Prix of Gibraltar. I know it's got another name. I can't think of it right now. Ustinov's albums were always very strange. Also, he's in Robin Hood. He's the voice of Prince John. This is exactly actually what it says. He's telling stories, and every time there's an opportunity to do an accent, he does an accent. They're fun, they're great, and the stories are interesting. A couple of them genuinely made me laugh. A couple of them were just so droll and dry and genuinely seemingly after dinner. There's literally the sound of pouring tea throughout it. I kind of want to make my own version of this, but obviously overplay it. Actually, I did a sketch called Tea, which you can find online, which I'm actually still very proud of. Tea plays a big part of it in terms of sound because it's overused on purpose. But it's fun. He does a few voices that we would consider insensitive now. Would still, I think, or would always be considered insensitive. Sorry, I had to look at something that's rendering. But they're not done in an insensitive way. They're just insensitive for the fact that, they might be a little on the stereotypical side. But that said, every accent, like, for instance, he talks about going to Japan. Every one of those accents is distinct. They're not entirely based off a stereotype of Japanese accents. They're you can clearly tell they are what he heard and what he wanted to relay to you to get the idea. Now, the laughs that were coming from the guys in conversation, were they coming from him telling the story or from, isn't it funny how goofy these people talk? It's hard to say. I don't want to necessarily judge that, but I will tell you, Ustinov, clearly everything he does comes from a place of interest in all these different people, because he also does these pretty good American accents for a lot of people. He does pick these different accents apart. They're fascinating. It's interesting to listen to. It's only barely a comedy record, though, because it is a conversation album. It's one of those things nobody could have gotten away with this except for Peter Ustinov, who is just way too charming and charismatic. I feel like he could have just done anything and made an album out of it. I mean, he did. He did. Listen to him do an album of the noises of cars and their drivers. Here's one I didn't expect to like. I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did. Funny Phone Calls with Steve Allen. I actually do need to see. Now, this came out in 1983. I do not know what years these are from. They don't tell me, but that said, Steve Allen used to do goofy prank calls, and I at first thought some of these were fake, but maybe the first one is. But the other ones don't really seem to be, but they're calling up people mostly in L.A., and in different places across the country, and recording the sound effects, and the prank calls, live, with an audience. There are points where people clearly figure it out. But what's really fun is getting to hear Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks do voices and help him out with these calls. It's super fun to listen to for that reason alone. And they're mostly very funny, and none of them are mean-spirited because Steve Allen was a pretty cool guy and genuinely had a good sense of humor. Knew how to prank in a fun way and a delightful way. I would, again, another one I would actually recommend listening to, despite the banana on the phone. And again, it's fun listening to Mel Brooks as a young man just be a smartass. It's one of my favorite sounds on the planet is that man's voice. Next, we have Barrack Room Ballads, which, despite the cover and despite the tag over his head, does not feature Terry Thomas. Terry Thomas just happens to be on the cover. Terry Thomas, with whom I share a birthday, and who does the voice of Sir Hiss on Robin Hood. So, just by coincidence, these things happen to pop up like that. These are just like Elsa Lanchester's songs, the Bawdy Cockney songs. These are that, but they're less innuendo, more just let's say tits a lot, or other words that are filthy. I believe they say dick. They say every little word. They have one that is Benny Bell's shaving cream style, where you think he's going to say a word, it says a different word, and it is basically shaving cream. They're filthy. These are mostly just filthy songs. They're not entirely mean-spirited, which is shocking. The one thing that stands out, the guys it sounds like an actual barrack room. It sounds like an actual military people, because there's at least one dude who's slightly off, and I think he's drunk, and maybe not off key, but definitely off rhythm. And that means there's a lot of songs I can't understand the lyrics to when it gets to the big dirty part. You want to laugh along with a stupid dirty joke, but there are a lot of times where you can't understand it. The Good Ship Venus, Rim Ram Roo, A German Officer, My Bonnie. It's just dirty stuff. They're just silly, dirty songs that I feel like would probably appeal to people who were in the English military at the time. Oh, I know that one. Isn't that a hilarious song? Oh, isn't it just mostly, it's just filth. But it's not, I don't know, it's not mean-spirited, but obviously wouldn't be considered open-minded. I mean, that's not what this, I mean, look at the cover. Is this about that? No, it's not. It's not recommended. Now, and I continue to give Mom's Mabley a try, and I've talked about it before. I have trouble sifting through it, sometimes because of her accent, so just because just a thick old lady accent is what I mean. This one's got a lot about what she calls fairy stories, which are a lot of songs about gay folks, which is interesting considering a lot of people have said that she was very likely homosexual herself. But, she knew it made the people laugh. And if you want to go by if you want to call funniest person the person who makes people laugh the hardest, Mom's Mabley makes people laugh harder than just about anyone on any of these albums. There are times, like I said, I just can't understand everything she's saying. But she knows how to tell a joke. Her personality is fantastic and it's fun to listen to for that. I had trouble wading through the gay stuff, just because it's not very funny to me. But I try and give it a shot, but this Mom's Mabley at the Playboy Club, she's fascinating. And it's also very interesting that she became famous given who she was at the time. A senior citizen, a black woman, possibly gay. I would say maybe that's one of those things you just don't tell people, the gay part, because they can't see it. So, at the time, if you're that funny, keep your career and keep part of the character that you like to do it with young boys, young men, just not old men. But so that's 11 albums we just pounded through, and I'm still not caught up. Your suggestions are welcome. If you want to tweet me at Comedy on Vinyl, tell me what you'd like me to listen to, and if I've got it, I'll, and even if you got a link to it or something, you want to send it to me. Happy to listen to it. I prefer to listen to it on vinyl or a recording of a vinyl, just for fun, and I don't mind listening to scratches. That's it. Go to comedyonvinyl.com. You can subscribe on iTunes. Rate us highly if you would. Write us a review. That really, really, really helps. Go to stolendress.com for all my other podcasts. I've got a movie coming out later this year. I'm going to continue to do this. My podcast is, it's a lot of fun, at least for me. I've also got Dispatches from Fort Awesome, which is a podcast about news radio. Got Dana J's Comedy Hour, which is a podcast about my sketch comedy with my best friend. That's about it. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, have a good thing.